Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're tackling a big one, a question that's been around for, well, 2,000 years. Why does the Catholic Church only ordain men as priests? Okay, so to really get a handle on the Church's position, we've got to look past the surface. This isn't just about a rule, it's about some really deep theological reasoning. It's definitely complex, so let's break it down together. All right, so the first thing you absolutely have to understand is this. In the Church's view, this isn't a policy that can just be, updated. It's not like priestly celibacy, which is a discipline that could change. No, the belief here is that the Church is bound by the choice Jesus himself made. They see it as something they simply don't have the authority to change. So, you might be thinking, how set in stone is this really? Well, let's look at the moment this was spelled out crystal clear in modern times. And here it is. This is the key statement. Back in 1994, Pope John Paul II released this document, Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, pretty much to put an end to the debate. And the language, wow, it is direct. He says the Church has no authority whatsoever to change this. They see it as something established by God, not by them. And then, to double down, the Vatican's main doctrinal office came out and said, hey, just so we're clear, this isn't just one pope's strong opinion. They clarified that this teaching is considered infallible, not because of some big, flashy declaration, but because it's something that's been taught consistently by all the bishops, everywhere, throughout history. It's considered a core part of the deposit of faith, the stuff that can't be changed. Okay, so how on earth did the Church get to such an absolute conclusion? Well, it all comes down to three main theological pillars. Think of them as the legs of a stool. They hold the whole thing up. So those three pillars are, first, being faithful to the example Jesus himself set. Second, this idea of the priest acting in the person of Christ. And third, 2,000 years of what they call a constant, unbroken tradition. Let's zoom in on that second one, because it's probably the most symbolic and maybe the most confusing. It's all about this Latin phrase, In Persona Christi Capitis. It means in the person of Christ the head. The idea isn't just that the priest is a representative for Christ, but that he sacramentally is Christ in that moment. So to get that, you have to understand a core metaphor in Catholic theology. It's this beautiful, powerful image of Christ as the bridegroom, and the Church, well, the Church is his bride. This whole marriage symbolism is absolutely central to everything. Okay, so here's where it all connects. The argument goes like this. If the priest is standing in for Christ the Bridegroom, then for that symbol to make sense, to be clear, the priest has to have a natural resemblance to the one he's representing. And since Jesus came to earth as a man, that resemblance, in this view, has to be male. Right, so that symbolism is then supported by that third pillar we mentioned, history. The Church is basically saying, hey, we didn't just make this up. This has been the consistent practice right from the very start. And if you look at the historical timeline, you can see what they mean. It starts with Jesus picking 12 men as his apostles. Then you see the early church fathers pushing back against any groups that tried to ordain women. Then you have church councils clarifying roles. It's presented as this unbroken line leading right up to today. And yeah, those early writers were not subtle about it. You've got guys like Tertullian, writing way back around the year 206, and he's super clear that celebrating the Mass is a manly function, and in his words, not something for women. But you might be asking, what about deaconesses? We hear that term from the early church, right? Well, the source material tackles that. It points to historical records, like from the famous Council of Nicaea, which show they weren't ordained. It was a separate, non-ordained role, mostly to help other women, especially during baptisms, which were full immersion back then, so it was a matter of modesty. Okay, let's just pause here, because all of this obviously raises a huge, really important question. What does this mean for the equality of women? Yeah, doesn't this just imply that women are somehow less? Let's dive right into that. How does the Church reconcile an all-male priesthood with the teaching that men and women have a totally equal dignity? Well, the whole thing rests on making a really sharp distinction between being equal and being the same. The idea is that men and women are 100% equal in dignity, in worth, in their ability to be holy, but that they have different, complementary roles to play. Equal, but not interchangeable. And the prime example they always point to is the Virgin Mary. I mean, in Catholicism, she's the most revered human being, period. Holier than any apostle, any pope, and yet, she wasn't a priest. For the Church, this is kind of the ultimate proof that the priesthood isn't about being more important or higher up on some spiritual ladder. Now, naturally, there are some very common arguments against this whole position. So let's look at how the official teaching responds to two of the most frequent ones. Okay, argument number one. Jesus only chose men because he lived in a patriarchal society. He had no choice. The rebuttal to this is that Jesus was constantly breaking cultural norms, especially when it came to women. I mean, he talked to them in public when it was a big no-no. He let them be part of his group of followers. He even made them the first witnesses to his resurrection. So from that perspective, his choice of only men for the apostles looks very deliberate, not just him going with the flow. All right, second big argument. People often quote St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, where he says there is neither male nor female in Christ. Sounds pretty clear, right? But the counter-argument is all about context. The teaching says that verse is talking about our salvation, that when it comes to being saved through baptism, our gender doesn't matter at all. But, they argue, it's not saying that all the different roles and functions within the church are suddenly erased. So, when you boil it all down, what you should really take away is that the whole issue, at least from the church's point of view, comes down to one question. Is the priesthood a job? Is it a right that someone can claim? Or is it something different? Is it a symbolic role, a vocation that you receive, one that's meant to represent something very specific? Really, how you answer that question changes everything.